guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled "I Don't Care If You Can't Find Who You're Looking For. This Man Is Literally Dying." So, a weird thing that happened the other day that I'm still amazed at. I'm a vigil volunteer at the local hospice center. For those that don't know, a hospice center is where elderly people with medical issues go to live out their days, sort of like a nursing home but more medically oriented, and a vigil volunteer is a volunteer there that gets called in to comfort the elderly and their families when the doctors can tell that the patient is in their final few days of life. Basically, there's a group of us who take turns in shifts as we're able to, so that the patient isn't alone during this time, or to help the family with any questions they have, or just to comfort them as well. They don't make for great places to volunteer, but it is extremely rewarding for those that don't mind, or at least are more comfortable around death. This particular day, I had just gotten off a 13-hour work shift, and got the call to see if I could volunteer, and I won't lie, at first I said no. The coordinator told me that the man was a Vietnam veteran, though, and being a veteran myself, I decided to suck it up and go in anyway. Veterans tend to help their own when they're able. So I go in, relieve the woman who had been watching him, and we start talking, and learn we were both in the same MOS job during our time in service, and start to share war stories and other life experiences. Just basically sharing our lives with each other, which is honestly about 90% of the job. After a few hours, I guess it was probably 7 to 8 p.m. at this time, a family is being extremely loud in the hallway, to the point that he can't hear me speak, so I close the door. I guess that the lady of the family sees the door close and came over and threw the door open so hard that it slammed against the wall. We both stare at her, and before I can say anything she starts yelling at me. L. Entitled lady. N. Nurse. VV. Vietnam vet. L. Excuse me, I can't find my family member. I don't remember who. So you need to get up and help me, now. Me, calmly, at first, because it's somewhat reasonable that she'd think I worked here because I wore khakis and a button-down shirt. And I also remembered what some Redditors thought of my last situation. Ma'am, I can't help you find anyone. You need to find a nurse for that. I also need you to keep your voice down, as this is a medical facility and you're probably disturbing other patients. L. I don't care if I'm disturbing anyone. I need to find my family member. And you and the rest of the staff are useless. Okay. I'll give her credit here. There are a few useless nursing assistants that like to hide instead of answering lights and helping patients, known for giving them trouble. But on the whole, it's actually a pretty good place. Me. Ma'am, I understand you're frustrated, but unless they've moved your family member, just go to their last room. I'm sure they're still there, since patients haven't been able to move rooms or even been able to get out of their rooms at the same time because of the pandemic. L. Don't you think I've tried that? They're not where they were last year. VV. You haven't visited them in a year? Well, hell, they probably took you off the visitors list. I sure as hell would if I was them. I'd take your ass off my will too. Gotta love elderly veterans, lol, they don't give a duck. If you haven't noticed, we're trying to have a conversation, so I need you to get your loud ass out of my room. Unknown to me or L, he hit the button for the light above the door, signaling a nurse that he needs help at this point. L. Just because you're old doesn't mean you can talk to me like that. I don't give a damn. Even if you're dying, you have no re. Me and VV, at the same time, and cutting L off. Well, that's good, because he, VV, will probably be dead by this time tomorrow. At this point, the charge nurse, aka head of the hospice at this time, walked up and heard us say this and was, understandably, immediately mad at me for bringing this up in that way, and stormed past L and into the room, immediately spinning on me. N. What do you think you're doing? Me. Trying to get this entitled idiot to leave? Yeah. I was mad and started cursing at this point. N looks like she's about to say something, but VV cuts in. This woman is trying to get him to leave me alone so he can go do God knows what for her, and told me she doesn't care if I live or die. So maybe not her exact words, but I'm not gonna blame a then soon to be, and now actually is, dead man for embellishing a little to get some problem lady out of his room during his final hours. N. Turning to Karen. Ma'am, is this true? I'm going to need you to get back to the front desk and wait for a nurse to help you. L. We've been here for 10 minutes already with no help. I'm not waiting any longer. N. Well, we try to have the front desk staffed 24/7, but with the virus we're understaffed and sometimes the nurses have to leave to help out a patient or another nurse. Since there's no one there, let's go back to the front desk and see if I can help you. L. No, you can help me now. I demand to know where, family member, is right this second. N. Her face immediately going cold. Family member, died 8 months ago and was cremated soon after because her family would not return our calls. You can check the morgue for her ashes, but I doubt they've saved them for this long. L looked shocked at this news, and honestly I think what a horrible person to her family member. She may have been kicked in at this point, and I think she may have possibly started to cry. I'm not sure, but she definitely went quiet and walked back to her family, with the charge nurse apologizing to VV and following her down the hallway. I don't know what happened to them after that, and honestly I didn't care enough to try to find out. I just couldn't believe that person's actions. I do feel a little sorry for the family since I don't know the reasons there was such a long time span between visits, but no matter the reason, it doesn't excuse walking into a dying man's room and causing a scene, making him yell at you. Seriously, who does that? The next story is titled HOA President Doesn't Like the Garden We Made. So, my wife joined the HOA board a little over a year ago at the request of the HOA president. We'll call him Steve. My wife and Steve got along quite well at the start, but when she started questioning some of his decisions and gave pushback on some votes, he started to dislike her. One of their bigger fights was involving the wooden deck that was on the property. Now the deck has been an eyesore ever since we moved in 5 years ago. We enjoyed going out on the deck to have the occasional community barbecue, but the wood was getting warped, and started to become a hazard for the younger kids that would play on it. They decided to tear it down, and my wife suggested a community garden. She wanted to pull out all the stops, get some boxes for different plants, a shelf to have snacks, books, sort of as a take one, leave one sort of thing. They get around to tearing it down, and my wife is told she can buy the equipment she needs to set up the garden. Early March, she buys all the needed stuff, such as soil, boxes to up the soil in, seeds, etc. I don't remember everything, but it all costed around $500 after it's all said and done. We were able to get reimbursed for everything easy. I should also mention that my wife and a few other members of the board were the ones who tore down and removed all the pieces of the deck from off the property, so they also saved a good chunk of money by not having to hire someone to do all that fun work. Turns out Steve wasn't a huge fan of how the garden turned out. Even though most the people we talked to liked it, others even donated some of their plants and one person even bought a fire pit as well, Steve was not impressed. He apparently went around telling people that it looks like a homeless camp. Now, I'll admit, it's not the greatest thing out there, but it still is nice, and a lot better than what used to be there. My wife's time on the board was coming to a close. She was getting way too stressed out over her responsibilities, and having to defend some of her votes because Steve would tell neighbors things that painted her in a bad light, so they would approach her about it. One example to give an idea, a lot of neighbors have been reporting break-ins to their vehicles, so it was proposed to buy security cameras for the parking lot. Steve was against it and suggested that they just put up fake cameras as a deterrent to the thieves. Wife explained how insane that was and got everyone other than Steve to vote in favor of actual security cameras. The next day, we get approached by multiple neighbors because Steve told them that she was the one that suggested, and got approved, that they have fake security cameras instead of real ones, which she had to clarify and bring another member of the board in who was there to back up her side of the story. With a heavy heart, my wife decided to formally resign from the HOA board last month. We found out today that Steve has decided to tear down the community garden, and my wife needs to pay the HOA back the funds that she was given to pay for the garden. To say we're livid is an understatement. We spent a good amount of the summer watering, building the garden. It's not much, just baby tomatoes, tomatillos, zucchini, blackberries, and bell peppers, but we enjoyed making it. We don't really have much for recourse. My wife just got verbal approval from Steve earlier this year, which at the time they were still close, so she thought it was enough, and when she wrote the minutes down, she never brought it up that it was approved. More of a learn your lesson the hard way sort of thing, and just wanted to vent. The next story is titled Job Keeps Scheduling Well Beyond Time That I Quit. A few years back I was waiting tables at one of those places where you could easily pay all of your bills and plus some, working 3 to 4 shifts a week. Because I had so much downtime and would do things like have random road trips if I had too many days off, I decided it would be a good idea to get a second job. I ended up taking a job working at a hotel waiting tables for breakfast. Surprisingly, hotel breakfast servers in Nice hotels can make decent money. This might be a good time to mention that they had to hire breakfast people because existing staff just wouldn't show up if scheduled. Anyway, it's a mess from the beginning. They're trying to do team service during breakfast, which was unnecessary and confusing to guests. More than once I'd show up and be the only front waiter, the person who actually takes the order and talks to guests, with 3 people whose only job is to keep drinks full, who would have a fit every time I sold alcohol. It's a drinking city, any people want booze for breakfast. And another 3 whose only job was to clear and reset. Completely unacceptable on a Saturday morning in a full hotel. Eventually I was over it and turned in my 2 weeks' notice. The schedule comes out for the week after I'm supposed to be done and I'm on it. I talk to the manager and remind him that I turned in my notice and I'm scheduled past my last day. I agreed to work that week, but that's it. Next schedule, same thing, same conversation. 3rd week rolls around and I'm over it. I remind all managers that my last day was 2 weeks ago and advise them to look at the schedule. I didn't show up for any of the shifts that week, so I assumed the matter was closed. Fast forward 2 weeks later, now 7 weeks after I turned in my notice and 5 weeks after what was supposed to be my last day. My phone is ringing off the hook at 7 a.m. It's one of the managers is desperate and trying to call me in. I remind him that I quit over a month earlier. Turns out that not a single front waiter showed up and the small army on the floor was incapable of doing anything beyond pouring a coffee or grabbing a juice. Things I'd told them about as part of my reason for leaving. I just told him sorry, I don't work there and it's not my problem, and hung up. Never heard from them again after that. The next story is titled You Speak Mandarin, so maybe you work at this Chinese restaurant. This happened to me almost a year ago. My friends and I were going to our favorite Chinese noodle place near our university campus. The place was well known for selling a bowl of noodles for a decent price and they don't skimp on the noodles. My favorite is the Chongqing small noodles. I often talk to the manager, and because she doesn't speak English our conversations are in Mandarin. After a quick talk with the manager, my friends and I were waiting near the entrance for a table to open up when suddenly this little old lady holding a toddler came up to me and said, Chinese word, 4 seats. Normal way of telling restaurant workers how many is in your party. I realized she mistook me for an employee and quickly told her that I don't work here. She gave me this mortified look and profusely apologized. I told her it was fine and directed her to an employee, and shortly after my friends and I's table was ready. In the middle of our dinner I saw a young couple come up and join the old lady in waiting for their table. I assumed that the couple was the toddler's parents after seeing the toddler being passed on to the woman. A while later I ran into the old woman while walking through a grove area of campus. The young couple and their toddler were nearby having a picnic. She apologized again for the mix-up, which again I told her is fine. Turn out she was visiting her son, who is a professor at my school, and wanted to meet her grandson. This reminded Nay a lot of how my maternal grandmother came all the way from China to help take care of me as an infant. She also complimented my Mandarin, stating I sounded like a old Beijing native, to which I explained my parents were both from Beijing, hence the accent. We said goodbye and I continued my walk feeling a bit more happy. The next story is titled Store Manager Screwed Me for the Last Time. Cast. Me, store manager as SM, HR lady as HL. So I worked for Target for far too long, and by the time I quit I had put up with enormous amounts of BS from customers and the upper staff. My work schedule was chaotic, and after repeated complaints to HR and the SM I started getting nights. Unfortunately, when you're closing and working the back room, no one tells you any updates happening in the store. I don't like dealing with customers too often, so I chose to work in the stockroom or receiving to lessen that chance. So when suddenly I was scheduled to work on the sales floor, and work CS desk, I was confused and really annoyed. I spoke to my department manager and SM only to find out that my job was dissolved and no longer a role. So I quit. I gave my 2 weeks notice. HR walked me through it and they said they'll call to cash me out and I'll be done. As I said before, the scheduling there was awful, so I received my call from HR and went to pick up my final check on Friday. The store schedule had me down to work Friday and Saturday after the cash-out call. When I go to pick up my check, the SM yells at me for not being in uniform for my shift. I told I'm only here for my check. He disregards that and claims, I was paid for that Friday and Saturday shift, so I'm obligated to work it. Me being a fool, apologizes and puts on a vest, then works that Friday shift. At the end of the night SM writes me up, and wants me in tomorrow on time. So now it's Saturday, I show up in uniform and HL looks confused and asks me why I'm there. I tell her what happened the night before. She says, "No, we already wrote the check. You just had to pick it up. SM can't write up someone who isn't working here anymore." So HL takes me to the customer service desk to give me cash for that last shift and SM is there. He begins by listing off all the things he wants me to do. I reply, "No, don't work here, wasn't supposed to work last night either." This is confirmed by HL. So his response is, "Well, you're already here and in uniform and the online orders are really backed up, so do me a favor." I said, "Sure thing," took my cash from HL and walked out. The next story is titled "That Girl Doesn't Work Here, That's My Daughter." Not as insane as a lot of these other stories, but I wanted to share. It was my 12th birthday, and that year I wanted some new tennis shoes, so my parents took me shopping at Academy. Because sometimes the shoes inside don't match the label, I was opening the boxes and replacing them if I wanted to look at them. I was wearing a teal untucked t-shirt with baggy jeans, and I was also 12. But I guess the act of putting things back where they belonged made me look like an employee somehow. A lady walked up to me and asked if I knew where something was. I said no, sorry, and walked away since I was pretty shy and I was still shopping. A few minutes later I sat down to try on a pair, and my mom was checking out some of the shoes when she overheard the same lady talking to a manager out of my earshot. She was complaining about some rude employee, how she shouldn't treat their customers like that, etc. The manager asked what she looked like and she said a teal t-shirt, brown hair. "Excuse me, but are you talking about that girl over there?" "Yes, was she horrible to you too?" "No, and that girl doesn't work here, that's my daughter." I didn't hear any of this, my mom told me afterwards, but I remember my mom going back to again and chewing her out. Maybe because she used to work retail and was happy to finally be on the other side. Or maybe she was just sticking up for me, I don't know. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel and post some bear emojis in the comments.